time to fly.
Alright, the second trick that I'm about to show you is pretty controversial. There was a time last year on YouTube where this trick kind of caught wind in the YouTube community. A lot of people were, one, doing it wrong, and two, they were using it for the entire mix, which makes no sense. But basically, if you've never heard of the Munson curve, basically it's easier for us to hear higher frequencies than lower frequencies. So a lot of people picked up on the fact that pink noise actually shares a similar curve to those frequencies. When I actually looked at pink noise in a spectrum analyzer, it was doing the opposite of what I would think that the frequency spectrum of pink noise should look like in terms of trying to match up what you're hearing to your mix. But there was this plugin that came out called Pink, and this is another free plugin that you can download, and it is the opposite of the pink noise spectrum. So you'll see that this curve is actually slightly going up. Just so that you can see that better, I'm going to use Span, which is another free plugin. If you haven't noticed, I'm only teaching you guys with free plugins, and by the time I actually get into anything that you have to pay for, I think everything that I'm going to use for you guys is under $5. My channel is basically focused on getting you to get good mixes without spending a lot of money on extra plugins. I just want you guys to use what you have. I want you guys to not crack plugins that cost $500 just to do something that you already could have done with the free stuff that you have right inside of your DAW. But anyway, here I have Span pulled up. So one thing you might notice about my version of Span versus what you start out with as default, I have a larger frequency range that I could see here. So I could see below 20 Hertz. And to do that, all you have to do is just click on this settings tab and then just change your frequency down to 1 or down to whatever you want. All right, so with this plugin, it makes everything that we've learned about the pink noise technique actually makes sense. If you were to load up actual pink noise, this would be backwards. You would have this high end up here, and then as we went down, less and less and less of the higher frequencies. A lot of people that were using the pink noise technique always complained about how their low end wasn't right. And it's because with pink noise, this low end is going to be a lot higher. So whatever they did with this plugin, they flipped it around so that this is actually more accurate in terms of trying to balance your levels with what you're hearing. So another thing that people forget, I'm surprised that this option isn't right here on the plugin, but hey, it's a free plugin. You want to switch everything to mono. You don't want to worry about what's going on the left and right. That's something that you do after you balance your middle signals. That way, when you get out of mono and go back to stereo, you could hear the correlation problems. So that's another benefit of mixing in mono. So if you balance all of your levels in mono, and then all of a sudden when you go out of mono, a certain sound sounds really loud, that's because you have too much stereo information on that sound. So that will tell you, all right, let me turn down the side information on that sound. And sure enough, you'll see that that side information is causing negative effects on the overall mix in terms of correlation, and how that mix will translate goes back to mono. Yeah, that's just something to keep in mind. Basically what we want to do, turn down the kick, turn down the 808, and what we're going to start out with is the kick drum, and we're just going to turn up the kick drum until we could hear it, and then we're going to turn it back down right below the threshold to where we can't hear the kick anymore. So now we can hear the kick drum. Now we're just going to turn it down until we can't hear it anymore. And there it is. You might notice, especially if you're wearing headphones, that I turned it down to where I can't even feel the kick, to where you can't hear it, but there's going to be a point where you could kind of feel it. I still go down right below that. I literally don't want to hear the kick. I don't want to feel it. I don't want to do anything. I want to make it so that if I turn it up just a little bit, all of a sudden I start noticing the presence of the kick. That's the level that you want it right below. And same deal with the 808. So now we're going to mute the kick, and we're going to do the same thing with the 808. There we go, we got it. So again, you'll notice that these levels are ridiculously low. All we were doing was just balancing the two. So now we can take both of these, we can raise these levels up and they'll be matched pretty well. And there we go. And again, from there, you can adjust whether you want the 808 a little bit higher or a little bit lower. To my ears, I already hear that using this technique, the 808 sounds a little louder than the last technique that we just used with the vintage meter. So it's all about just using your ears after you get the general feel, especially if you're a beginner. You're basically using these techniques to train your ears on what you're kind of looking for, and then you're just going off of your taste after that. And again, we're gonna go with the phase. It sounds better with it flipped. And you'll notice I'm not worried about flipping the phase when I'm doing the pink noise technique, because we're just listening to one at a time. So you're matching this up with the pink noise, not with each other. After you balance it out, that's when you worry about your phase correlation. I'm just going to show you how I would balance these two particular sounds just by using my ears. And you'll notice that it's going to be slightly different in terms of the balance between the two techniques that I showed you before, because my taste is just slightly different. But it's going to be ridiculously close to what we just got through listening to. The cool thing about using your ears, you notice that I was leveling the kick first in those two examples. Well, when you're using your ears, something psychological with the brain when you're starting out mixing is that whatever is the last element that you mix in, you tend to push that louder than everything else. You'll start to not hear the things that you mixed before. Once you get into, past a dozen sounds, the sounds that you mix first tend to be the lowest sounds in the mix. So that's why a lot of people will mix their instruments first, because you want those instruments to be kind of the bedding of the beat, and then they'll mix in their drums last because you want those to stand out in the mix. At least when it comes to hip hop, you'll mix that kick drum in very last because you just want that to be the most prominent thing. When it comes to vocals though, I do that backwards. Like I'll mix in the beat exactly like that, but I'll do that after I get the vocals to sit exactly where I want. So I'll mix everything around the vocals. So basically I'll have the vocals first and the kick drum very last. So here we're going to take the 808 and mix this in first. And then we're going to have the kick last, because typically I like the kick to kind of be the driving force of all of my beats. And the 808 should just be a supporting, or not should be, but I prefer the 808 to be a supporting instrument to my kick. And we're just going to get the 808 to where we can hear it and where we like it in general. One thing that I'm keeping in mind while I'm doing this, I'm leaving room for the kick so that I can actually raise this kick up to 0 after I balance this 808. So I kind of want this to be set in a lower place so that I have room to actually push that kick up above. So I have this 808 hitting below -3 right now, so that should leave me plenty of room for me to bring in my kick. Now this is about the sound that we were getting with the pink noise and the vintage meter, but I'm actually gonna push this kick a little louder. That's sounding more like my style right there. Yeah, I'd say that's a pretty good spot, maybe right there. And you'll notice that my kick is actually hitting louder than my 808. You could see the meters right here. My kick is going to my drum bus, and my bass is going to my bass bus. Let me raise that up. So it's just slightly higher, but you'll see in the mix bus we are clipping a little bit. So what I'm going to do is highlight both of these now that we have the balance, and I'll just bring this down a little bit until we're hitting right below 0. And typically, again, this is these are the last two elements that I'll be mixing in. So when I bring, basically I would be highlighting all these tracks and I would be bringing these down to make sure that it's hitting below 0. And then after that, I'll start adding plugins on my mix bus, on my drum bus, so on and so forth. But some people like to do that backwards. Just a side note to keep that in mind, because I am going to teach you this later on. Some people will like to add their effects on the drum bus and the bass bus before they start mixing these instruments right here. Still, same thing. When you're leveling your mix, you're going to do that even before you start adding effects on these buses. So everything that I just said is still going to apply. You're going to level all this out first, and then you could start adding effects on your drum bus and your bass bus, and then you could go back and start adding effects on your individual instruments. If you've liked this series so far, definitely let me know in the comments, and definitely subscribe if you haven't already. Leave me a like, a thumbs up, and I will see you in the next few videos. Peace.